It all began with an unassuming Craigslist ad that looked too sketchy to be legitimate. Night shift cleaner needed. $30 per hour. No experience necessary. Must be able to follow instructions without question. I'd scrolled past dozens of scams before this one had all the warning signs of a pyramid scheme or worse. But the pay was impossible to ignore. $30 an hour for cleaning after being laid off from my warehouse position 3 weeks earlier. My bank account was hemorrhaging money. The rent was due in 5 days, and my last unemployment check wouldn't cover even half of it. I didn't have the luxury of being picky, so I applied expecting yet another dead end. To my surprise, I received a response within the hour. Not a form letter, not a request for my social security number or bank details, but an actual interview invitation for that same evening at the Old Meridian Movie Palace. You know, the one, that forgotten theater on the edge of town that everyone abandoned once the 16-screen multiplex opened downtown. I almost didn't go. Something about the speed of the response felt wrong, desperate even. But desperation was something I understood all too well these days. So at 9:30 p.m., I found myself driving through a part of town that seemed to exist in permanent twilight. Streetlights flickering like dying fireflies. The Meridian stood like a ghost from another era. Its once grand marquee hung crooked. Missing letters creating cryptic messages no one bothered to read anymore. The neon trim that had once outlined the building in electric blue was dark now, save for one stubborn section near the entrance that still pulsed weakly, casting intermittent shadows across the cracked pavement. I parked in the empty lot, my car's headlights briefly illuminating peeling movie posters in glass cases. The images were faded beyond recognition, warped by years of sun and neglect. As I killed the engine, the silence that engulfed me was absolute, the kind of quiet that makes your ears search desperately for something, anything to latch onto. The front doors were unlocked. I pushed through into a lobby that time had forgotten. There were no flashing digital displays announcing showtimes. No glossy promotional standees for upcoming blockbusters. Instead, faded prints of movies I hadn't thought about in years lined the walls, their colors dulled and distorted, like memories that had been left out in the rain. The theater smelled like waxed floors and dust, but underneath that was something else, like burnt sugar left too long on the stove. Sweet but wrong, pleasant but vaguely nauseating. "Mr. Richards?" I presume. I nearly jumped out of my skin. The voice had come from behind the concession counter, where a man now stood watching me. He wore a crisp, outdated uniform, pressed white shirt, navy vest, silver name tag that simply read, "Manager." His hair was neatly combed, not a single strand out of place, yet somehow it looked unnatural, like a wig that had been positioned with mathematical precision. "Nathan," I corrected him, my throat suddenly dry. "Nathan Richards." "Ah. Yes, Nathan." His smile didn't reach his eyes, which remained fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "I'm Mr. Holloway. I manage the Meridian." He gestured for me to approach the counter. His movements were stiff, almost mechanical, as if each gesture had been rehearsed 1,000 times, but still didn't come naturally. "You don't have any prior theater experience, correct?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "No, sir, but I'm a fast learner. I've worked janitorial positions before." He held up a hand, stopping me mid-sentence. "This job isn't about learning, Mr. Richards. It's about following. If you can follow rules, you'll do fine." Without another word, he reached beneath the counter and produced a laminated sheet. Thick plastic with reinforced corners, worn along the edges as if it had been handled frequently. The title at the top read simply, "Rules for Night Staff." The list was short, only 7 items. I skimmed it quickly, my confusion growing with each line. "Do not enter Theater 6 after midnight, no matter what you hear inside. If Theater 2 is already unlocked when you begin your shift, lock it immediately, and do not look inside. If someone knocks on the emergency exit from the inside, do not The concession stand must be cleaned first. Do not consume anything found behind the counter. If the intercom plays music, stop what you're doing and stand still until it stops. There is no theater. If the screen in Theater 4 turns on by itself, sit and watch. Do not leave until the movie ends." "Is this some kind of joke?" I asked, forcing a nervous laugh. Mr. Holloway didn't blink. Not even once. He just stared at me with those unnaturally still eyes. "You will find cleaning supplies in the janitor's closet near Theater 1, he continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Your shift starts at 11:00 p.m. sharp. You will leave at 6:00 a.m. unless stated otherwise. Never enter any theater during a movie." That was it. No forms to fill out, no orientation, no HR meeting. Just a set of bizarre rules and an old man who made me sign a single page, my name, today's date, and a line reading, "I understand the rules provided." As I signed, I noticed the page was thin, almost translucent, like onion skin paper. The pen Mr. Holloway handed me left behind ink that seemed to pulse slightly, as if still wet long after it should have dried. "Any questions?" Mr. Holloway asked, taking back the pen. 1,000 questions swirled in my mind. Why these specific rules? What happened in Theater 6 after midnight? Why would anyone knock from inside an emergency exit? What kind of movies played in Theater 4? And most pressing, why did they need a night cleaner at all for a theater that, as far as I could tell, hadn't shown a film to a paying audience in years? But $30 an hour meant I could catch up on rent, pay down my credit card, maybe even start saving again. So instead, I just asked, "When do I start?" "Tonight," Mr. Holloway replied. "In fact, you've already begun." My first shift was uneventful, all things considered. The place was quiet, dead quiet. I mopped the sticky tiles in the front lobby, wiped down the counters, vacuumed the faded carpets. I avoided the theaters as instructed, though I couldn't help but peek into Theater 3. It was empty. Rows of cracked red seats facing a blank screen. Nothing odd about it. The silence was oppressive. Every sound I made, the squeak of my shoes, the sloshing of the mop bucket, even my own breathing seemed amplified, bouncing off the walls and returning to me slightly distorted, as if they'd picked up something else along the way. By 5:45 a.m., I was back in the lobby with my jacket on and keys in hand. Mr. Holloway never reappeared. I just let myself out, locked up, and went home. I slept fitfully that day, dreams filled with empty theaters and endless corridors. But when I checked my bank account online, a deposit had already been made, more money than I'd earned in 3 days at my previous job. I decided I could tolerate some strange rules and an eerie building for that kind of compensation. The second night was similar, but something was different. Theater 2 was already unlocked when I arrived. I remembered the rule, lock it immediately, and do not look inside. The door was cracked open about an inch, and a faint blue light pulsed from within, flickering like a dying fluorescent bulb. I hesitated, one hand on the door handle. Something scraped across the floor inside, slowly, deliberately, like furniture being moved by someone trying not to make noise. I took a deep breath, pushed the door shut, and turned the key in the lock. My hand trembled as I pulled it away from the knob. Whatever was in there was now secured, and I had no desire to find out what it might be. The rest of that night passed without incident, though the blue light continued to seep from beneath the door of Theater 2, casting strange, elongated shadows when I passed by in the hallway. It wasn't until the third night that I started thinking about quitting. Not because of anything dramatic, not yet. It was just the sense that something was fundamentally wrong with this place. Time passed too slowly. The clocks never seemed in sync. I'd turn a corner and feel like I was being watched, only to find empty space where I was certain someone had been standing just a moment before. At precisely 3:22 a.m., the intercom hissed to life. What followed wasn't music. Not exactly. It was a warped lullaby, slow and distorted, like an ice cream truck playing underwater. The sound crawled through the building, seeping into every corner, every crevice. I froze, the mop slipping from my hands and landing with a wet thud on the freshly cleaned tile. The sound wasn't particularly loud, but it filled every space, pressing against my eardrums from all directions. So I stood. I stood still like the rule said. 1 minute passed, then 2. The music stopped, replaced by the soft, static hum of silence. My body sagged with relief. I didn't clean much after that. By the end of my first week, I had seen enough to know that the rules weren't suggestions, they were lifelines. That was the night I heard the knocking. I was taking out the trash, heading toward the back corridor where the emergency exit was located. According to the building plans posted by the fire extinguisher, no one was supposed to be in the building. I had checked every room twice, and then it came, one knock, then two, then three. I froze in place, my heart jackhammering against my ribs. The sound was coming from the emergency door, the one marked, "For use in case of fire only." But the sound wasn't muffled as it should have been if someone were knocking from outside. It was too clear, too sharp, like the knocking wasn't coming through the door but from the other side of the hallway. "Hello," a voice called softly. I said nothing. "Can you hear me?" the voice continued. "Please, I need help." I got locked in. It was a woman's voice. Young, desperate. "Please don't leave me here." My feet refused to move. My fingers curled into fists, nails digging into my palms. Every instinct I had screamed to open that door, to help whoever was trapped inside. But I didn't, because there was one thing wrong with this scenario. There was no panic bar on the emergency exit. It only opened from the inside. Whoever was knocking had come from somewhere else. And then I heard her say my name. "Nathan? Please. I know you're there. I can feel you." That was when I turned and ran. The trash bag forgotten in the hallway, leaking something dark and viscous onto the carpet. The next day, Mr. Holloway left me a note folded on the janitor cart, handwritten in careful cursive. "Good, you listened. Not everyone does. You're doing fine. Just remember, the rules exist for your protection." That was all. No signature, no explanation, just confirmation that yes, the knocking was real. Yes, I had been tested, and yes, the rules were more than just words on a laminated sheet. They were survival instructions. By the time my second week started, I knew the Meridian wasn't just old and forgotten. It was something else entirely. A place caught between pages of reality, hidden in plain sight. It operated on rules that weren't just strange but sacred. Guidelines etched into the very walls. Breaking them wasn't a fireable offense. It was a death sentence. And yet I stayed. I'd love to tell you it was bravery, but that'd be a lie. It was rent. It was gas. It was the last $63 in my bank account and a credit card already breathing fire. Whatever this job was, whatever rules it came with, I needed it more than I feared it. At least, I thought I did. The second week was when I met Elise. I came in early that night, expecting the usual empty theater, but the lobby wasn't quiet. Someone was sitting on the snack bar counter, legs swinging idly, wearing a red Meridian Theater hoodie that looked 2 sizes too big. Her hair was a mess of auburn curls, frizzed and tangled as if she'd just stepped out of a wind tunnel. She didn't look like she belonged here. And yet there she was, as comfortable as if she were lounging in her own living room rather than a possibly haunted movie theater at 10. "You must be the new guy," she said, her voice casual, like we were meeting at a coffee shop and not in the dead silence of a cursed theater. "Nathan?" I replied, confused. "And you are?" "Elise," she said, hopping down from the counter. "I work here too, on and off, mostly off. How come I haven't seen you before?" She grinned, a flash of white teeth in the dim light. "Because I only come when I have to. When the rules change." That phrase landed in my stomach like cold soup. "What do you mean, they change? You think the list is permanent?" Elise slid off the counter and walked toward me. "No, Nathan. The rules grow. They react. They punish. And sometimes they warn." I wanted to ask more, but before I could, she pointed toward the hallway. "You need to check Theater 7 tonight. That's not in the rules," I said automatically. Her eyes, which I now noticed were an unusual amber color, almost gold in the weak lobby light, narrowed slightly. "It is now." The hallway to Theater 7 felt longer than usual. I swear it stretched with every step, like I was walking into a tunnel instead of a corridor. The overhead lights flickered as I passed, one of them dimming just long enough to leave me in near darkness. Elise had vanished. No explanation, no goodbye. One moment she was standing beside me, the next the hallway was empty. Just me and the deepening silence. I reached Theater 7 and stood in front of the door. I half expected it to be hot. to the touch or humming with something unnatural, but it was cold, lifeless. Just a door. I opened it slowly, unsure of what I was even looking for. The theater was pitch black, not movie theater dark. This was void dark. My flashlight barely pierced it. The beam swallowed whole like a match in a cave. I stepped inside, 1 foot over the threshold. Nothing happened. Another step. Still nothing. Rows of empty seats unfolded in front of me. The screen was blank, as it should be. I waited, held my breath, then turned to leave. The screen flickered, just once, a brief burst of static, then nothing. I backed out of the room without another glance, pulling the door firmly shut behind me. Later that night, I found a new sheet on the janitor's cart. Same plastic laminate, same typeface. But now there was an 8th rule. Do not enter Theater 7 unless instructed. If you do, exit immediately when the screen flickers. Do not wait for the second flicker. It hadn't flickered again. I sat on a bench in the lobby and stared at the sheet. 8 rules now. They really did change. The theater was watching, learning somehow. That was worse than any ghost. On Thursday, I broke a rule. Not on purpose, that's what I keep telling myself. But that doesn't really matter, does it? It was 4:15 a.m. I had just finished cleaning the restrooms when I passed Theater 4. Its door was slightly ajar. I peeked inside. The screen was on. A grainy, sepia-toned film played on loop. A man sat at a table in a small gray kitchen. He wasn't doing anything, just sitting, staring straight ahead, occasionally blinking. The audio was nothing but soft static. I froze, remembering Rule 8. If the screen in Theater 4 turns on by itself, sit and watch. Do not leave until the movie ends. My feet moved before my brain caught up. I walked into the room and found a seat right in the middle. The door shut softly behind me, the sound like a whisper against my skin. The man on the screen didn't move. Time passed. 5 minutes, 10, nothing happened. Then the man on screen turned his head. Not toward anything in the kitchen, but toward me. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't some film technique. His eyes found mine through the grain and noise. I felt the pressure of his stare deep in my spine. He smiled. And then he stood. I don't remember much after that. My vision blurred, my limbs locked up. I couldn't move, couldn't blink. It felt like he was stepping out of the screen, closer with every frame, the distance between us collapsing like a house of cards. When I woke up, I was in the lobby. The sun was rising. My phone was dead. My shoes were missing. A note was taped to the counter. You left too early. Do it properly next time. There was a single bullet point below it. Rule 9. If the figure on the screen stands, do not look away. Do not close your eyes. Do not move. By the weekend, I had stopped trying to rationalize things. I didn't Google the theater. Didn't ask Mr. Holloway for clarification. I didn't even tell my roommate, who probably thought I worked for a janitorial service or maybe as a night guard for an empty office building. Some truths weren't safe to say out loud. Lise showed up again on Saturday. This time she was sitting cross-legged on the floor. In Theater 5, no movie played, no lights were on. Just her in the stale air. You watched it, didn't you? She asked, not looking at me. I didn't finish it, I admitted. She nodded. Then it's gonna keep showing up. Different places, different screens. It wants you to finish. What happens if I do? She tilted her head, her auburn curls falling across one eye. No one knows. How do you know all this? I asked, my frustration mounting. Who are you really? She didn't answer, just stood and left. Her footsteps didn't echo. I was alone again. I found the man from the screen again 2 nights later. This time it was in the reflection of the popcorn machine. He stood behind me, pale, expressionless. I didn't turn around, just lowered my gaze, stepped back, and walked away. I didn't run, didn't scream. I just followed the rule I hadn't seen written yet, but somehow understood instinctively. If you see it outside the screen, ignore it. I left that shift early, just walked out at 5:30, the job unfinished. There was no punishment. That night, a new rule appeared on the janitor's cart. If you see the figure from Theater 4 elsewhere in the building, do not engage. Do not speak. Do not acknowledge. By the end of week 2, I knew I was in too deep. I had started dreaming in the theater's colors. Dusty reds, velvety blacks, grimy gold trim. I'd wake up to the sound of distant film reels spinning, or the soft rustle of popcorn, even though my bedroom was still and silent. Something was changing in me. I could feel it. My nerves weren't wired the same way. My fear had evolved. It wasn't about ghosts or monsters anymore. It was about patterns, about attention. The theater wasn't haunted. It was aware, and it had started watching me back. There's a moment in this job when fear stops being loud. It doesn't scream in your ears anymore, or turn your legs to jelly every time a light flickers. It becomes something quiet, something that waits, like stale air in a sealed room, pressing in slowly, reminding you every second that you don't belong here. That was week 3 for me. No jump scares, no violent confrontations, just the building breathing deeper, watching more closely. And the rules, they didn't just change. They started reacting to me. On Monday, I found a notebook in my locker. I didn't put it there. No one said anything about it. Just a plain black journal with no title and a leather cover that felt wrong, almost too warm to the touch. Inside, someone had handwritten a rule in red ink. When your shadow no longer matches your movements, return to Theater 1, sit in the front row. Do not look behind you. It wasn't laminated, wasn't official looking. Just scribbled like a frantic reminder to someone who couldn't trust their memory anymore. I closed the book, shoved it to the back of the locker, and tried to forget about it. I should have taken it more seriously. It was sometime around 2 a.m. when I noticed it. I was sweeping near the concession stand, going through the familiar, calming motions. Back and forth, back and forth. Then I noticed that something was just a beat off. I glanced down. My shadow didn't move. I blinked, swept again. My arms moved, my body moved, but the shadow just stood there, mid-sweep, frozen in time. And then, as if catching up, it jerked violently to match me, like a marionette pulled by clumsy strings. I dropped the broom. Every instinct told me to run, to get out of that lobby and into the open air, to feel wind and streetlights and noise again. But the notebook came back to me. So I went to theater. The room was empty, of course. Cold, still, the kind of stillness you only get underground, where even sound is afraid to move. I sat in the front row. The lights dimmed behind me. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I heard the door click shut. I don't know how long I sat there. I counted in my head, got to 600, maybe more. At some point, I stopped being aware of time and just waited for the presence behind me to go away. It never made a sound, never stepped closer, but I knew something was there, watching. I could feel the pressure of its eyes, like cold fingers on the back of my neck. Eventually, the lights came back on. I stood up, and my shadow followed me perfectly. The notebook wasn't in my locker anymore. On Wednesday, Elise showed up again. This time she looked worse, pale, shaking, dark circles under her eyes, like she'd been awake for days. She didn't say hi, just sat down on the bench near the lost and found cabinet and stared at the floor. "You okay?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. He started writing again. "Who?" "The projectionist." I didn't know what that meant, didn't ask. It didn't feel like the kind of thing that wanted to be known. She looked up at me, her eyes too wide, the whites visible all around her amber irises. "Don't open the lost and found tonight. Doesn't matter what you hear, doesn't matter what you think you see. Don't open it." "What's in there?" "Memories," she whispered. "Pieces of people who didn't follow the rules." I wanted to laugh it off, pretend it was a joke, but I didn't. Because I remembered the bag that moved in the trash chute last week. I remembered the scream that followed it. I nodded. "Okay, I won't open it." At precisely 3:03 a.m., the cabinet started rattling. The sound wasn't loud, but it was sharp, metallic, like something with fingernails was scratching from the inside. Then came the voice. "Nathan, you left your keys." I patted my pockets. The keys were there. "Don't leave me in here. You forgot me." The voice was mine. Not similar, not close, It was my voice, my exact tone, pitch, cadence. I stepped back. It's cold. So cold. I can't feel my legs anymore. The cabinet door rattled harder. Don't you want to see what you lost? I left. Didn't even look back. Cleaned the rest of the lobby in silence, avoiding that side of the room like it radiated poison. In the morning, I found another rule taped to the light switch. If the lost and found speaks to you, ignore it. Its contents are not yours anymore. Thursday night, the projector in Theater 6 turned on by itself. That wasn't unusual anymore. What was unusual was the fact that it played a home video, not a movie, not even a film reel. It looked like grainy footage from an old handheld camera, shakily aimed at a birthday party. Balloons, streamers, a table with a cake on it. A little boy blowing out candles while people clapped and cheered off-screen. The boy looked familiar. It was me. I stood in the back of the theater, frozen in place. The footage panned around the room, catching glimpses of my childhood home, my parents, my sister, all laughing, alive, untouched by the years that would come. Then the image glitched. Just for a second. The lights flickered. The screen pulsed. When it stabilized, the party was gone. The room on the screen was empty. Same setting, but aged, abandoned. The walls were cracked, the balloons deflated, the cake covered in flies, and someone stood in the corner facing away from the camera. I left. I didn't wait to see what happened next. Friday, Elise wasn't around. Her nameplate on the old staff roster near the office door had been scratched out with a red marker. I asked Mr. Holloway about her. He just blinked. Who? Elise. She said she worked here. You must know her. He frowned slightly, then looked past me toward the hallway. There hasn't been an Elise on staff since. What happened to her? He gave me a look that stopped me cold. She broke a rule. Which one? The one we don't write down. That night, I was alone. The building felt colder, the air heavier. The rules didn't feel like guidelines anymore. They felt like a countdown. Near the end of my shift, the lights in the lobby dimmed. A buzzing filled the air, like static crawling across glass. I turned and saw my reflection in the ticket counter window. It didn't move. My real body stepped back. The reflection stayed still. Then, slowly, it smiled. Not a smirk, not a twitch, but a wide, splitting grin that stretched impossibly far, teeth too sharp, eyes too wide. I blinked, and the reflection was gone. No sound, no movement, just my own wide-eyed face staring back. There was no rule for this. I went home early again, didn't clock out, didn't leave a note. When I returned the next night, there was a new sheet taped to the janitor's cart. If your reflection smiles without you, leave. You are not alone. By the end of the third week, I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of being remembered by this place, of it etching me into its walls, its screens, its cursed little rooms, of becoming part of the footage, part of the whispering, part of the rules, because the longer I stayed, the clearer it became. This place didn't just punish rule breakers, it kept them. It was during the fourth week that the theater stopped pretending. By now, I could navigate its halls with my eyes closed and dodge its tricks with something close to instinct. The rules weren't just rules anymore. They were second nature. I knew when to stop moving, when not to look, and when to sit down and watch until the movie ended, no matter what, screamed behind my seat. I knew how to listen for the lie in a voice calling my name from the wrong side of a locked door. I knew how to survive, but survival wasn't enough anymore. The theater wanted more. It started subtly. The walls began to move, not visibly, not with dramatic quakes or groans. They shifted like thoughts drift. One moment I was walking past Theater 3, and the next it was Theater 5. The hallway I'd just come down would vanish when I turned back, replaced with one I hadn't used in days. Doors that had once been bricked shut were suddenly open. Signs flickered between languages I didn't understand. One night, as I stood at the concession stand, the air smelled like seawater. Another time it smelled like rot. And once, I swear the popcorn machine was full of teeth. The notebook returned, same black cover, same too warm leather. It was sitting on the stool in the projection booth, waiting for me. I opened it. This time, there were 3 rules scribbled in frantic handwriting. If the marquee outside displays a movie you recognize from your dreams, do not enter that theater. If the projector in Theater 1 plays footage from the future, do not tell anyone what you saw. If you see yourself inside the building while you are still inside the building, leave immediately. One of you is not supposed to be there. I tried to tell Mr. Holloway about the walls moving. He just nodded slowly. It does that sometimes, he said. Shouldn't that concern you? I asked. He sighed. The theater's not a place, Nathan. It's an agreement. He adjusted his cuffs. The same pressed white shirt he always wore. We break it more often than we realize. With whom? I asked. He didn't answer. He turned back to the old film reels he kept stacked behind his desk, his fingers tracing the metal canisters with an almost reverent touch. Friday night, I broke Rule 14. It wasn't intentional. I didn't even notice it until I was already inside. Theater 8's door had been open, and music drifted out, soft piano, the kind that made you feel like you were falling asleep under a weighted blanket. I stepped in without thinking. On the screen was my apartment. Not just any view of it, but the exact angle I saw every morning when I opened my eyes. The bed, the fan that clicked because I never tightened it, the poster on the wall with the faded corner. Someone was lying in the bed. It was me. I turned to leave. The door was gone. There was just wall. I backed away from the screen, breath shallow, heart pounding. On the screen, the figure in the bed stirred. It reached for the nightstand, picked up a phone and answered it. There was no ring, no call, but it nodded as if listening. Then it turned to face the screen. It smiled. I blinked, and the lights went out. I woke up in Theater 3, alone. No movie, no sound. I checked my phone. 6 missed calls, all from my own number. Saturday night, Mr. Holloway wasn't in his office. The light was on, but the room was empty. His desk was clear. The drawer with the rules was open and empty. His coat was gone. No note, no sign of struggle, just absence. I checked the building from top to bottom, from the projection booth to storage, through theaters 1 through. He wasn't there, but Theater 9 was. You remember Rule 7, right? There is no Theater 9. Yet at the end of the east hallway where a broom closet used to be, a new door had appeared, large, black. A number 9 was painted on it in white. The paint was fresh, wet. I didn't touch it, just stood there staring. Behind the door, something breathed, long, slow, and deliberate. I returned to the lobby. Elise was there. I hadn't seen her in over a week. She looked tired, hollow. You found it, she said. Theater 9. She nodded. It wasn't supposed to open yet. Where is Mr. Holloway? She looked toward the hallway. He made a deal. What kind of deal? She didn't answer. Instead, she handed me a film reel. The metal canister was old, rusted at the edges. Play this in Theater 5. Midnight. Don't stop it. Don't leave. When it ends, you'll know what to do. I opened my mouth to argue, but she was already gone, her red hoodie vanishing around the corner. Midnight came too fast. I stood in the projection booth of Theater 5, fingers trembling as I loaded the reel. The machine groaned to life. The film caught. The screen flickered. It was surveillance footage, grainy black and white. The theater lobby, empty and still. Then a figure entered the frame. Me. Not from last week, not from earlier that night. Me. In the moment, walking past the camera that didn't exist. The film jumped to another view. The break room. Me again, sitting at the table, eating from a plastic container. Another jump. The booth. Me, standing at the projector, watching the film. I looked up and saw myself watching myself. I backed away from the machine. The air in the booth thickened, buzzing with static electricity. My teeth ached. From the hallway outside, footsteps echoed, deliberate, familiar. I turned off the projector and all the lights went out. Somehow, I ended up in the main lobby. The screens on the walls weren't playing trailers anymore. They were playing me. Every mistake, every broken rule, every moment I failed to follow instructions exactly. I saw myself looking into the lost and found. I saw my eyes close during the Theater 4 screening. I saw the instant my shadow had lagged behind me. Then I saw Mr. Holloway. He stood in Theater 9, hands raised, a figure in black, looming over him. Not a person, not quite, more like a hole in reality given shape. Its face was an old film reel spinning too fast to track. Mr. Holloway said something. The film had no sound. Then the screen went black. Underneath the screen, text appeared. Rule 17. If Theater 9 opens, a manager must be given. I heard someone crying. I followed the sound to the hallway. Elise was crouched against the wall, her head in her hands. It wanted him, she whispered. He thought giving himself would close the door again. But it never wanted just him. What does it want? I asked, my voice barely audible. She looked up at me, tears streaking her face. It wants an audience. That night, I dreamed of rows of seats, filled with people who didn't move. Eyes wide, faces blank, all watching me. I stood on a stage with no script, no lines, just a spotlight that burned too hot. Behind me, a door opened. The number 9 was painted on it in blood. I woke up screaming. The notebook was on my pillow. Only one rule this time. Rule 18. There must always be a performance. I didn't go to work that night. Didn't check in, didn't call. Just sat in my apartment, every light on, phone clutched in my hand. At exactly midnight, my TV turned on. No remote, no signal, just static. Then my face. Then the theater. Then Theater 9. Wait, I didn't go to the theater for 3 nights. Each time the clock hit midnight, something happened. My TV would turn on, static. Then a single frame of Theater 9. Always the door. Never open, never shut. Just waiting. My phone would buzz with unknown numbers. No voicemails, just missed calls from area codes that didn't exist. I tried to sleep, tried to eat, but the theater had already wormed its way under my skin. I wasn't living anymore. I was waiting. On the 4th night, I found a flyer taped to my apartment door. Old, yellowed paper stamped with the theater's logo, the one they hadn't used since the 80s. It read, "Tonight only. Final performance doors open at midnight." Below that, scrawled in pen, "Bring the book. Don't be late." I hadn't seen the notebook since the last rule appeared, but when I turned around, it was sitting on my kitchen table, open to a blank page, a pen resting beside it. I picked it up and left without locking the door behind me. I didn't expect to need it again. The theater was already lit when I arrived. Not just the lobby lights. Every theater glowed through the windows, a soft golden pulse like heartbeats behind glass. The air smelled like ash and candy, like something sweet that had burned too long ago to fix. Elise was waiting inside. She didn't speak, just nodded toward the east hallway, then turned and walked away. I wanted to stop her, to ask if this was the end or the beginning, but the way she moved told me all I needed to know. She wouldn't be here when it was over. The door to Theater 9 stood wide open, no number on it now, just a hollow space where the paint had bubbled and peeled. Inside, darkness stretched farther than the building should allow. A corridor in place of seats, no screen, no rows, just a single aisle carpeted in deep red vanishing into black. I stepped inside. The door shut behind me. The corridor twisted. Sometimes it looked like a backstage area, with ropes and scaffolding dangling from above. Other times, it looked like the tunnels behind the projection rooms, all narrow beams and chemical smells. Once, I swore I walked through my own childhood bedroom, complete with peeling glow-in-the-dark stars still clinging to the ceiling. All of it flickered like someone changing channels too quickly. And all the while, I carried the notebook. Its pages flipped on their own. Sometimes I saw words, sometimes drawings. One page showed the lobby as I remembered it on my first day. Another showed the same room years later, overgrown with vines and rot. On another page there was only a sentence. "You are both the actor and the stage." Eventually the corridor opened up into a massive auditorium, bigger than it should be, bigger than any building in this town had room for. Seats stretched into the dark like an ocean of red velvet, and every one of them was filled. I couldn't make out their faces, only silhouettes still silent, watching. The stage lights flickered on. At the center stood Mr. Holloway. He looked tired, older than before. His eyes were sunken, his hands trembling. But he smiled when he saw me, something sad and proud all at once. "You came," he said. "They didn't have a choice," I replied. "None of us do," he agreed. He held out his hand. I gave him the notebook. He flipped to the last page, then carefully handed me the pen. "Write the last rule," he said. I looked down. The page was blank. My hand shook. "What do I write?" Mr. Holloway stepped back into the shadows.
"What you've learned? What must come next?" His voice echoed strangely. "This is your theater now."
I wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, but there was no use. The crowd was waiting. I bent down. The pen felt heavy. I wrote, "Rule 19. When the curtain rises, you must perform, even if you don't remember the lines." As soon as the pen lifted from the page, the stage lights flared blindingly. The notebook burst into flame in my hands, curling into ash between my fingers. The crowd clapped, not wildly, just once in perfect unified rhythm, and then the curtain rose. What followed is hard to describe. It wasn't acting, not really. It was memory, moments I hadn't known I'd forgotten, childhood fears, teenage mistakes. Every moment, I broke a promise. Every time I told a lie, all of it played out on the stage. Me, dressed in costumes I never wore, saying lines I never memorized, but knowing exactly what came next. It wasn't a story. It was a confession. The audience never moved. They just watched, eyes locked, breaths held. And as I reached the end, standing alone under a pale white spotlight, I understood this was my audition, not to leave, to stay. When the lights went down, the silence pressed in like a weight. Then the clapping began. One by one, slow, deliberate, like raindrops before a flood. The figures stood and applauded, their hands never quite touching, the sound not quite real. Mr. Holloway stepped onto the stage beside me. He looked at the crowd, then at me. "They accept," he said. "Accept what?" "You, as the new manager." I shook my head. "I didn't agree to this. I didn't volunteer." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "You performed. You wrote the rule. That was the agreement." The stage creaked beneath us. The audience began to dissolve, their forms melting into static, drifting upward into the rafters like smoke. Mr. Holloway began to fade too. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," he said, "you watch the doors, you follow the rules, and you write the new ones." "Wait, I don't know what I'm doing," he smiled. "You didn't know then, either." Then he was gone. I woke up in the office. Mr. Holloway's desk, his chair, the old clock ticking steadily behind me. The keys were in my pocket. The first shift started in an hour. The janitor cart was freshly stocked. On the desk sat a new notebook, black leather. Its first page was blank. There was only one note taped to the desk. Rule 1. Never let them know you're afraid. They can smell it. I sat back, took a deep breath, and waited for the first knock on the door. Then I heard it. Not from inside, but from the lobby. The sound of someone entering the theater. Footsteps hesitant but determined. A voice called out, "Hello? I'm here about the night cleaner position." I stood, adjusted my vest. When had I put on a vest? And ran my fingers through my perfectly combed hair. The silver name tag on my chest caught the light, the word manager gleaming in the dim office. I looked down at the notebook on the desk, still open to that first blank page. Picking up a pen, I began to write, "Rules for night staff." The ink pulsed on the page, wet and alive. I smiled, though it didn't reach my eyes. Time to meet the new janitor.